evening, everyone. My name's Crispian Lees. I'm the Head of Education at Advantage Learn. And this evening, I'm going to chat about the national benchmark tests and how to navigate this quite complicated landscape. But before I do that, I would like to just briefly introduce who Advantage Learn is. Some of you might have encountered Advantage Learn before, but essentially we're an educational organization that was founded out of Durban, South Africa, but we largely online and serve learners all over the country. And we serve learners in the four following domains. We were actually founded in advanced program mathematics, which is now known as further studies mathematics. And we help learners in all of the further studies programs, which are extension certificates, qualifications that the IEB offer. We help learners in further studies maths, further studies physics, and further studies English. The second area where we support learners significantly is in national benchmark test preparation, and that's what you're here this evening to find out about. We were the first educational organization to help learners prepare for that test, and you'll be hearing all about the national benchmark test in a moment. The next thing that we help learners and schools with is resources, largely in maths and science and further studies maths via our NEO series. And some of you might actually have encountered these resources when the pandemic first hit and schools were locked down, as we made our maths resource available to the nation for free for a period to assist with the continuity of learning over that challenging time. The last area where we help learners is in exam preparation. We are specialists in STEM, so we largely assist in maths, physical science, life sciences, and we do also assist in accounting. Okay, so that's who Advantage Learn is. Now let's get to what I'm going to be addressing this evening. Okay, so first of all, we're going to start off with what are the national benchmark tests, and I'm going to give you an overview of what the national benchmark tests are. We'll then chat around who needs to write the NBTs and why they are important. And lastly, we'll chat a little bit about how one can prepare for the national benchmark tests. All right, so let's get cracking straight away then with what are the national benchmark tests. Okay, the national benchmark tests are a set of standardized tests that were commissioned by Higher Education South Africa back in 2008. Higher Education South Africa is a governing body that sits above the universities and the tertiary institutions in South Africa. And essentially, they recognized that tertiary institutions were having a new challenge that they were needing to deal with, whereby the profile of learners entering universities from a knowledge-based perspective was very different to what universities were used to previously. And so, and further to that, the National Senior Certificate, the Matric Certificate, was not giving universities enough information about the readiness of learners for university to empower the universities to better support learners for success at university. Okay, so it was commissioned by Higher Education South Africa via a research group at the University of Cape Town called, it was called CTAP at the time. It's now called the Center for Educational Assessments, CEA. And within that, they have the National Benchmark Tests Project that administrate the national benchmark tests. So they are a set of tests used to assess academic readiness for tertiary study. Now, after they were commissioned in 2008 and the results started to be used by universities to inform program development, so to inform how they adjust their programs to support success at a university level, universities started to recognize that actually the information from the national benchmark tests was also incredibly useful in making admissions decisions. So the landscape in South Africa is that our universities and our tertiary institutions are largely oversubscribed. We have multiple times more applications towards tertiary study than we can accommodate. And so universities have a significant challenge in that they need to make the best admissions decisions on which candidates they should admit into their degree programs. And the underlying drivers for a university in that regard are providing fair access to tertiary study, but then also admitting the learners that have the highest probability of succeeding in those degree programs. Because ultimately the mandate of tertiary study is to deliver skills, the necessary skills into the economy to grow our economy, and then to further the body of knowledge in the various fields. So universities are acutely interested in admitting the right candidates into their degree programs so as to increase the graduation rate across the board. And what universities were finding was that the national benchmark tests, in combination with the national senior certificate, the matric certificate, the matric results, was proving exceptionally helpful in forming better admissions decisions. And so universities started to use the national benchmark tests as an additional entrance requirement to make placement decisions. And so it started to be used as a placement assessment in a similar way to the way that the SAT is used in the United States. Okay, so that gives you a little bit of context of why this national benchmark test came about. In terms of what the actual tests, there are two assessments in the national benchmark tests: the AQL test and the MAT test. Okay, and I'm now going to talk a little bit around each of those to give you an understanding of these. Okay, so first of all, let's chat about the AQL test, which stands for academic and quantitative literacy. If learners need to write the national benchmark tests, the AQL test is the compulsory test. Okay. And then significantly, the AQL test is comprised of two distinct domains: academic literacy, which is a language domain, and then quantitative literacy, which is a mathematical domain. Okay, so be very careful and be very clear that the AQL test is not just a language test, it is also a mathematical test. Okay, academic literacy, which is the language component of the test, is all about testing learners' ability to read and understand and communicate meaning from bodies of text. While the quantitative literacy domain of the AQL test is somewhat similar to mathematical literacy at a high school level, and it's all about numerical application and essentially numeracy and functional mathematics in everyday life. Okay, so those are the two domains that are assessed in the AQL test. And the NBTs are standardized assessments that are administered via multiple choice. Okay, so in the academic literacy domain, some of the subdomains that can be expected are grammar, figures of speech, vocabulary, among others. And in the quantitative literacy domain, learners can expect numerical application type questions. Okay. All right. The second test of the NBTs is the MAT test, which is simply short for mathematics. This is a pure mathematics test, which is closely related to core mathematics at school. And it tests learners' ability to apply their pure mathematical, core mathematical knowledge. Okay, just like with the AQL test, it's a standardized assessment administered via multiple choice. And in the MAT test, learners will need to demonstrate understanding of mathematical concepts. Okay. Significantly, and this is true for both the MAT test and the AQL test, there is no calculator is allowed in the test. And this is a significant stumbling block for learners in the national benchmark tests. Far too many learners are far too reliant on their calculators. And so one of the most significant things that learners can do to prepare for the tests is actually to, as far as possible, put their calculators away in their maths lessons at school and start to develop their arithmetic, their mental maths, their powers of estimation, things like that. Okay, so that's a brief overview of the AQL test and the MAT test. Now let's get to who needs to write the NBTs. Now, this is a very complex question. Okay, the first bullet here says most grade 12s applying for tertiary study in South Africa, as well as learners looking to enter competitive degree programs and or scholarship programs. Okay, that's quite a general statement. But if you dive into it, it is largely true. Okay, and so why do I say it in that manner? Well, the first thing for you all to understand is that entrance requirements at universities relative to the NBTs differ from university to university, and then they differ within universities from degree program to degree program. So in terms of who needs to write the NBTs, the answer is that it depends. And the answer is that it is different for everyone, depending on what universities you're applying towards and what degree programs you're applying towards. So the key takeaway that I want you to hear is that requirements are different for everyone, and you need to do the due diligence in terms of understanding your requirements. But here's a very helpful exercise that to do when navigating your requirements for the NBTs. And this should be done for a number of reasons. This is what I did when I applied to university. So the advice that I got, which was very good advice, was think of 3 degree programs that you could see yourself studying towards, okay? And apply towards those 3 degree programs. And the reason that advice was given to me was twofold. One, most people don't actually know exactly what they want to study beyond high school. So, you know, apply to a number of things that you could see yourself doing, and hopefully you get more clarity through the year in terms of where you want to take your career. Further to that, because of the landscape of tertiary study and how competitive it is to get into various degree programs, you can't bank on the fact that you're going to get into your first degree of choice. You may not, based on your application and based on the success of your applications in various degree programs. So that is important advice. Think of 3 degrees that you could see yourself going towards. The next thing is think of 3 tertiary institutions that you would like to study at beyond high school. So for me, for instance, I was interested in going to Stellenbosch. I had been on a hockey tour. I'd been fortunate enough to go on a hockey tour there, and I was just blown away by the university town and the facilities. I considered going to UCT as well. So that was one option. I actually think I applied towards 4 institutions. Wits was one, and then UKZN UKZN was the other. I'm from Durban, my family's in Durban, my friends are in Durban, so I thought, let me also apply to UKZN in case there's good reason for me to stay at home for my tertiary study. Although I know there are many learners in the room that will be quite excited about spreading their wings and going out to a university that's potentially further away from home. So those were kind of my options. So let's narrow it down to 3. Let's say I applied towards Stellenbosch, WITS, and UKZN. Then you need to look at so now you've got 3 degree programs that you're thinking of applying towards, and you've got 3 tertiary institutions that you're applying towards. For any of you that are doing statistics in your studies, that 3 by 3 represents 9 combinations of degrees and universities. So, you know, for me, the 3 degrees, I don't know if I mentioned this already, the 3 degrees that I applied towards was engineering, medicine, and business science. Engineering, because I was good at maths and science, so it seemed like a good fit. Medicine, because my mom wanted me to become a doctor, so I thought, let me put that down just to as an option to keep her happy. And then business science, because, you know, maybe business was a direction that I wanted to go. I wasn't sure, and so I kept my options open in that regard. Okay, and then like I say, those 3 by 3 combinations represents 9 different combinations of universities and degree programs. And the reality is that if any one of those combinations requires the national benchmark tests, then you're going to have to write the national benchmark tests. Okay, so when you drill into it, you can see that the statement that most grade 12s applying towards tertiary study is somewhat accurate in that you're going to have to submit applications across a number of degree programs and across a number of universities. All right. Now, fortunately, that is, well, first of all, that is quite a challenge. That is quite a lot of information for you to navigate. Okay. So don't stress. We specialize in supporting learners and parents to navigate this landscape, and we've put together a really helpful summary of the major universities in South Africa and their NBT requirements. And Kofi, who you haven't seen this evening but is supporting me online, she'll be sharing that document to you all so that you can take a look at it. I must say, first of all, and this is another word of insight that you need to be aware of, is that the requirements that if you are applying to tertiary study to start your first year of tertiary study in 2024, you are looking for the 2024 entrance requirements. And those at universities are housed in what they call the undergraduate prospectus or the undergraduate guide. Okay, that's where that's getting the information from the horse's mouth. If you go to the university's website and you find the 2024 undergraduate prospectus, that is the correct prospectus for first year in 2024. Now, I highlight that because that is quite confusing. You know, we're currently in 2023. If you go onto the university's websites now, what you will largely find is you'll find a 2023 undergraduate guide or a 2023 undergraduate prospectus. And when you see that, you will assume that, you know, that's the right one because we're in 2023. But the way that universities name those documents is by the year of admission. So the 2023 undergraduate prospectus or the 2023 undergraduate guide was actually relevant to last year's matriculants starting first year this year. Okay, and universities' updated guides will only start to be released now from March until about May, depending on what university. Okay, so the document that Hofi's dropped in the chat for you, that is for 2023 admission. So that's last year's summary. We're working up this year's summary for you. And because you've all joined us this evening on the webinar, we will have your details. And as soon as that is released, actually, let me just clarify that. As soon as all of the university's information is released, this document will be updated and you'll be able to get it from Advantage Learn. What I would highly recommend that you do in order to make sure that you get the updated summary as soon as it's released is that you either subscribe to our mailer or follow us on Facebook or Instagram, because we'll release it as soon as it is updated via those various channels. All right. So that's some important advice. All right. Then the next thing is something that I already mentioned. If you need to write the national benchmark tests, you will have to write the AQL test. Okay. The AQL test is the compulsory test if you're writing the national benchmark tests. The MAT test is only generally required in degree programs that either have a large mathematical component to them, so they are maths-oriented degree programs, and so universities need to understand applicants' mathematical abilities, or the MAT test is largely used in your exceptionally competitive degree programs where they are massively oversubscribed, and so the admissions departments are looking for as much information that they can get from applicants to make the best admissions decisions. And so they appreciate having 2 test scores that they can reference in their admissions processes. Okay. Now, I must state at this point, the national benchmark tests do not replace the NSC requirements towards APS scores at universities. They are a secondary requirement at some universities. The primary requirement for admission to university is in the degree program that you're aspiring towards is that you achieve the minimum APS score for that application. And that APS score is based on your national senior certificate results. So your core subjects at school that you're going to write matric finals for. That's the first primary requirement. If an institution requires the NBTs, that will be a secondary requirement. Okay, so it'll be an additional requirement. It's not like it's one or the other, it's both. Okay. So just to rattle off some examples of the differences in requirements between universities. For 2023 admission, UCT required the national benchmark tests across the board in all faculties, with the exception of engineering and the built environment. If you were applying to engineering and the built environment only, then you didn't need to write the NBTs for UCT. In Stellenbosch, they pulled back the NBT requirements quite markedly, but there were still some select programs that required the NBTs, like the law faculty required the NBTs, and some support programs required the NBTs. Wits University also had some specific faculties that required the NBTs and others that didn't. The University of the Free State required it comprehensively across the board for undergraduates applying to the University of the Free State, as was the case for Rhodes University. So the requirements are very different, and that's the key takeaway. Requirements are different for everyone. They differ from university to university, and then they differ within universities from degree programs to degree program to degree program. So make sure you do the due diligence for your case. Okay. The last thing, well, yeah, pretty much the last topic that I'd like to cover is why you need to prepare for the national benchmark tests. Okay. So first off, they are a very unique style of assessment, which is very different to what learners are used to. Okay. They are multiple choice tests Okay. And multiple choice assessments are not that prevalent in our schools. If I recall back when I was in high school, the only time that I encountered multiple choice questions was the first 5 or 10 questions of my physical science paper. Every time I wrote physical science, the first 5 or 10 questions were multiple choice questions. And multiple choice questions are very, very different. First of all, there's no part marks in multiple choice. You either get it right or you get it wrong. There's no method marks or working marks. Okay, and so that's quite a challenge. But then there's also a lot of opportunities in multiple choice. You can use different types of approaches to get to the right answer. You can use estimation, you can use process of elimination. And the beauty with multiple choice is that the answer is there. You just need to pick the right one. Okay, and so there's these challenges of multiple choice, but there's also these opportunities. And so preparing to write that kind of assessment is very helpful because there's some great techniques that you can use to improve your score. Okay. As I mentioned, the multiple choice format proves challenging for learners who haven't practiced. And what we generally see, especially in the maths test, is that learners' math results the score that they achieve on the national benchmark tests in math, when compared to their core mathematics results, it's generally 20 to 30% down. So if you're achieving 80% in core maths at school, on average, learners would then achieve between 50 and 60% on the MAT test. And there's a number of reasons for that. It's a different style of assessment. The insightful questions in the test are quite difficult, and the questions are unscaffolded. So what do I mean by that? In a normal maths test, questions are largely scaffolded for learners. What that means is that a question is comprised of a number of steps. So it might be question 6A to D. Question 6A is not that difficult, but the answer to question 6A enables you to more easily solve for question 6B, which enables you to more easily solve for question 6C, and so on and so forth until the last part of the question, which is probably the most challenging part of the question. But the question's been scaffolded and the learner has been guided along the solution strategy by that scaffolding. Okay, in a multiple choice type format, there's no room for that level of scaffolding. So a learner will be presented with question 6D without having been asked A to C. And so we'll have to plot that solution strategy, which is very challenging. Okay. The other thing I mentioned was that there's no method marks. Okay. And so it's quite an interesting exercise for learners to do, to take their last maths test that they wrote, look at the mark that they achieved. Let's say 40 out of 50. They got 40 out of 50, 80%, a good result. Then go into that question paper and look at which of the questions you actually achieved 100% for. Because remember, in a multiple choice format, it's either right or it's wrong. Take credit for those marks. For the questions where you only got part marks, so you got 1 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 7, that's telling us that you didn't get the end result. You didn't get the final answer right. Okay, so don't take credit for those method marks and then recalculate your score. And what you'll largely see is that your mark goes down by in the order of 20 to 30%. And so that's a significant challenge. Accuracy is key. But then, like I mentioned, there's also opportunities in multiple choice questions in that the answer is there. Okay. The other reason why learners really need to prepare for the national benchmark tests is because you are not allowed to use a calculator. And like I said earlier, far too many learners are far too reliant on their calculators, and they have to a large extent lost their arithmetic abilities, their abilities for mental maths, their powers of estimation, which are all really important skills, really important thinking skills in order to solve things quickly, but then also to solve things without the use of a calculator. And there's a maths component in both the MAT test and the AQL test. And while the QL is more similar to mathematical literacy, and while there is a stigma at school that mathematical literacy is easier than core maths, what we often see is that learners fall down most significantly in the quantitative literacy domain because they're not used to that style of mathematics. All right. Now, the last reason why we really encourage you to prepare for your NBTs is because the results can affect your future. If they are being used as an entrance requirement at universities, then that affects your probability of placement into the degree program that you're aspiring towards, which is the next step towards the career that you're aspiring towards. And so if that is the case, give yourself the best chance at admission by achieving the best score in the national benchmark tests for your tertiary applications. Okay, so we've chatted around why they're important. I've mentioned the fact that the reality is that getting into tertiary institutions is highly competitive. One thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that not only do you need to know whether or not you need to write the NBTs, look out for the fact that some institutions actually also prescribe by when you need to have written the test. So some institutions require you to have written the test before a certain date as well. Okay, we largely see that in medicine application streams, because medicine as a degree program, like I said earlier, has so many applicants that their admissions teams need a large amount of time to work methodically through all of those applications to finally arrive at the learners that they're going to admit. And so they need to have all their information in good time to enable that process. And that's why they might prescribe a date by which you need to have written the national benchmark tests. And notice it's a date by when you need to have written the tests. It's not the date by which you need to have received your results of the test. That's largely how it is phrased. Okay, and as I mentioned, the NBTs have varying degrees of importance per university, per department. What's important is that you do your due diligence to understand your requirements. Okay, and that brings us on to this slide on how to prepare for the NBTs. Do your research. Requirements are different for everyone. Get to know more about the NBT, okay? You can go to advantagelearn.com where we have a wealth of information on the national benchmark tests and we address frequently asked questions, okay? Remember, with advantagelearn.com, we help learners to prepare for the national benchmark tests. We do not administrate the tests. The tests are administrated by the National Benchmark Test Project at the Center for Educational Assessment. The portal, the online portal, for the administrating organizations is nbt.ac.za. That's where you'll go to actually book the writing of the test, to register to write the tests, and that's the portal via which you'll get your results. And Khofi will post that link in the chat for you so that you can differentiate between those two. So nbt.ac.za, that's where you book the actual tests. If you're looking to help to prepare for the tests, or you're looking for additional information on national benchmark tests, you can also go to advantagelearn.com and we'll help you in that regard. One really exciting thing that we did last year was we launched a free app to help learners, parents, educators, schools to understand the NBT requirements and then give learners an opportunity to benchmark their readiness. So I'd really encourage you right now to go onto your app store if you've got an iPhone, or onto the Google Play Store if you've got an Android phone, and go and download the NBT Prep app. We've taken UCT's guaranteed admissions requirements and we've arranged it into a very helpful flow where you can quite simply understand what UCT's guaranteed admissions requirements are. And that also includes requirements relative to your APS scores, what subjects you need to have in your matric subject bouquet in order to be considered. And then what's really cool is that you can actually go and try an NBT style quiz in both the MAT domain and the AQL domain. And it then references your score between what you achieved there and what your requirement is. And that then gives you a good idea of whether you're on track or whether you're going to need to do some work to achieve the score that you might need for your application. Okay, there's also a lot of other information on the app to help you to navigate this landscape. All right, then work hard and apply yourself to your school mathematics and to your home language. You're being assessed in the maths domain, in quantitative literacy, and in the math test. So if you apply yourself in maths at school, that's going to help you tremendously. In your maths class, put your calculator away as far as possible. Okay, there's actually so much of your maths that doesn't need a calculator. Try not to use a calculator in those instances. Okay, of course, there is some of your maths that you absolutely require a calculator for. For instance, I can't tell you what tan of 35 degrees is. I need a calculator for that. I can tell you what tan of 30 degrees is though, because it's a special angle and because we should know our special angles if we're doing core mathematics. Okay. Then you can consider doing a preparation course. As I said, Advantage Learn was the first educational organization to help learners to prepare for the tests. And we run in-person, live online, and self-paced courses via Advantage Learn. The in-person courses are available in all major metros. Live online courses can be taken from anywhere in the country. And then the self-paced option is also really helpful. And those are available for both the MAT test and the AQL test. Okay, so like I've said, we were the first to help learners. We recognized that there was a huge amount of anxiety around these tests. And so we started preparing learners all the way back in 2014, and we've helped many, many learners to achieve the results that they need in the national benchmark tests. We help learners to prepare across both domains, AQL and MAT, via in-person workshops or live online workshops or via our online courses. And there are preparation options available in both English and Afrikaans, because those are the languages of testing in the national benchmark tests. So learners can either take the national benchmark tests in English, or they can take the national benchmark tests in Afrikaans. Included in our preparation courses are access to our mock tests, which will give learners an opportunity to try an assessment similar to the NBTs, and then practice and get rich video feedback in terms of how to get to the right solution if they weren't able to. And learners are also supported by our experts via our engagement features on our platform. Okay, so in terms of understanding our preparation options, like I said, there's workshops and there's online courses. The workshops, the in-person workshops are in all major metros, Durban, Cape Town, Johannesburg. But if you're not in one of those regions, you can join a live online workshop which covers the same underlying material. And essentially, this gives you face time with one of our expert NBT prep educators. And it's at a set date and a set time, a structured program. It includes access to our mock NBT tests, includes the workbook that we work through in the workshop. And that's a brief explanation of our workshops. We partner with many schools in the country to actually do dedicated workshops at schools. And I know that some of our partner schools, learners and parents are actually on this evening to find out about more about the NBT. The online courses are more like your classical online course, where This is great in that learners can configure their own individualized study schedule. They can learn from anytime, anywhere, as long as they've got access to a device and an internet connection. It gives them 12-month access to the online course. Learners have access to online educator support, as well as the mock tests. And the online courses are available in both English and Afrikaans. These are the various options and the pricing for them, just to give you an idea of the pricing of our preparation courses. If you want to take preparation forward with AdvantageLearn.com, simply go to our website and navigate to national benchmark tests, filter by the mode of preparation that you prefer, and you can actually register directly via our website. If you're from a partner school, look out for your dedicated preparation offering on the site, which will bear the name of your school. And at our partner schools are eligible for significant discounts on the workshops. And so make sure that if you are from a partner school, you're booking into the partner school preparation option. Okay, now we've been through quite a lot. I hope it's been helpful. If you're still feeling overwhelmed by these national benchmark tests, we do have a premium pass option where we basically guide you through the process of registering, of advising you when you should write your test, registering for your test, and then we give you comprehensive access to our preparation offerings and we guide you through that preparations to make you as prepared as possible. So that's something to consider if you're finding this landscape a little bit overwhelming. Remember, the application is really helpful to get you to understand your preliminary requirements and to benchmark your readiness and to access more information. And that's everything that I wanted to cover this evening. So I really hope that you found it helpful and informative. And I'm glad to see so many questions coming through the chat and the Q&A. So I'm going to start addressing those now. So let's start with Thiru. What is the duration of the courses? Okay, so when you're dealing with the workshops, our MAT workshop is a 2-day workshop, and there's 9 hours of contact time, of teaching time. But included with the workshop is a wealth of online resources as well, where learners can then go thereafter the workshop and work on and continue to work through resources if they found that they had some gaps in the workshop. But in terms of the actual workshop, 9 hours for the MAT workshop. The AQL workshop is 4 hours with covered over 1 day. And similarly, there's online resources to supplement preparation beyond the workshop should learners need more. Through current matric demands, don't leave too much time for much else. That is such a good point. It is such a demanding year for learners, and there is actually so much on learners' plates. And that's why many learners really appreciate the preparation courses that we offer, because they are very focused and the learners are guided, as opposed to them trying to figure out how they should go about preparing for the test. We really help them in a targeted way to make efficient use of their time to prepare. How different are these assessments to SATs in terms of format and question types, outside of the obvious geographical context type questions? Okay, so while they are somewhat similar to the SATs, you must remember that the SATs are underpinned by the by the United States secondary education curriculum. Okay, and I always forget, is it the GED or the GDE curriculum? That's the United States curriculum. So the SATs are informed by that curriculum because they need to assess learners based on what they expect the learners to have a degree of knowledge in. Whereas the national benchmark tests are underpinned by the CAPS curriculum. Okay, so there is a distinct difference in those curricula, and so they will be different. Where they are similar is where they are used in terms of entrance into university, and then in terms of their format being multiple choice type questions. All right, so there is a distinct difference, but they are similar. Thanks, Cananello. Okay, I'm now going to go to a few in the Q&A before I cycle back to Letlotlo. A few afternoon, sir. I wanted to ask how much are NBTs normally out of? And also, can we have your guys' Instagram handle? Thank you. Sure, Afiwe, thanks for the question. Kofi, if you can drop the Instagram handle in the chat. I imagine it's at Advantage Learn, but it might be something other than that. I'm unsure. In terms of how much the NBTs are out of, the AQL test is 75 questions, okay, and those 75 questions are split between academic literacy and quantitative literacy. All right, so and it's, as far as we can tell, 1 mark per question. It's not like questions are weighted differently, although, you know, the reality is that information is not available. But we know there's around 75 questions in the AQL test. In the MAT test, it's a 60 question test. Okay. So, and both of those tests are 3 hours. So in AQL, you have 3 hours to cover 75 questions. In MAT, you have 3 hours to cover 60 questions. Okay. Thanks, Afiwe. Letlotlo. Hope I said that all right. Kindly indicate how much the test is and around which time of the year are they usually done? Okay, great question. So in order to, the fee to write the test is 130 Rand per test. So it's 130 Rand to write the AQL test. It's 130 Rand to write the MAT test. And therefore, it would be 260 Rand if you needed to write both. Around what time of the year are they usually done? The NBT test dates start from May, and they run all the way to December. And there are opportunities to write almost on every weekend. So there are multiple opportunities to write the test. The tests are written at multiple test venues across the country. And there are also, and this is a great question in that it raises the important note that the tests can be written as pencil and paper in person, or the tests can be written online. So the national benchmark tests actually have a very robust online testing platform, which with a lockdown browser, with online proctoring that ensures the integrity of the test. So you can actually take the tests online. There are some infrastructure requirements for you to do that. You're going to need to have a stable power supply. That's a big one for all of us in South Africa. Stable internet connection. And then you're going to have a device that meets the minimum requirements. And that's a laptop or a PC that has a webcam and a microphone, because the online proctoring system, it is recording your session. It has algorithms that monitor your eye patterns, monitor your audio, and so that they can pick up any forms of cheating. And if they do, if it does flag that, it invalidates your results. Okay, so if technology isn't your friend, go and write in person. If technology is your friend and you have the good infrastructure, you can write the test online. Great question, Letlotlo. In the NBTs, are we allowed scrap paper to do working? Good question. So what I do know is in the in-person test is that you are given some scrap paper to do some working. In the online test, to be honest, I'm a little bit unsure whether that you're allowed the scrap paper. I imagine that you would be allowed, but that you would have to, there would be a auditing step of what you have available to you in your quiet home venue before you write. So in the in-person test, you definitely are allowed scrap paper. I'm unsure in the online tests, to be honest. Good question, Shreya. All right. So I don't see any other questions. All right. So just before we go, some last frequently asked questions that I just want to rattle through. Do I have to send my results to the universities I'm applying to? No. While the results will be made available to you so that you know what you got, when if a university needs your national benchmark test result, they will get it directly from the National Benchmark Test Project. You don't have to send it to them. You can send it to them, but they're still not going to. It doesn't matter whether you send it to them. They're still going to go directly to the National Benchmark Test Project to get your result. How much does the NBT cost? We chatted about that. Where can I write we chatted about the cost. It's 130 Rand to write the MAT test, 130 Rand to write the AQL test. Where can I write the NBT test? Either in person at testing venues all over the country, or you can write it online. Who typically needs to sit the MAT test? We spoke about that. It's largely learners applying towards degree programs that have a large mathematical component to them, or learners applying towards degree programs that are very competitive to get in on, and those largely require the MAT test. Okay. Another question, a frequently asked question that comes up that I will also address right now is, can you write the tests more than once? And the answer is yes, you can write the national benchmark tests more than once. But you do need to be careful in that most tertiary institutions will only consider your first attempt, the result of your first attempt. So even if you've done the test more than once, they won't consider your second and third attempt. So the message is, make sure you do your best in your first attempt and achieve the best result that you can in your first attempt. Okay. All right. And that is everything. That brings us to the end of the presentation, and it is pretty much 6:30 on the dot. All right. So thank you everyone for your time and your questions. I hope this was helpful to you all. Most of you will be in your matric year, which is an exceptionally demanding year, as we mentioned. All of the best for your matric year, and all of the best with the national benchmark tests. Thanks for your time, and have a good evening.